It is 6:30, and I'm Alan McLennan, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, and I would like to welcome you all to what I believe is the largest board committee meeting, contemporaneous meeting in the history of the town. So what we've got to do here, just to make this legal in the open meeting law, I'm going to go through a listing here, and I'm going to ask the chairman of the different boards and commissions to convene their meetings. And at the end, at about 8:30, I'm going to have to unconvene us all. So that's the only thing I'm going to say this evening. So to begin, I'm going to convene the meeting of the Orleans Board of Selectmen, and I'm also going to convene the meeting of the Water Quality Advisory Panel. Then I'm going to ask Steve Bornemeyer to convene a meeting of the Planning Board.
I hereby call to order a meeting of the Planning Board.
Planning Board is in session. Jan Schneider, Board of Health.
If I convene the Board of Health of the town of Orleans.
Thank you. The Board of Health is in order. Len Short, Board of Water and Sewer Commissioners.
Convene the Water and Sewer Board.
All right. And the last one is the Architectural Review Committee, and I haven't seen Joy. Would someone from that committee convene the committee? Yes, thank you. The Board of Architectural Review is now convened as well. So what I'm going to do now is turn this over to Betsy Shreve-Gibb from AECom, who is going to manage the rest of this meeting. Now, just alert you that as you look at your agenda, we've got time slots set aside, and Betsy is going to manage this so that at 8:25, she's going to ask me to come up here and adjourn all the committees so that we get out of here at 8:30. I'm told that there's something else on television tonight, but that's something else. That's it.
Okay. Thank you very much, Alan. First of all, it's great to see such a wonderful turnout, and I'm really kind of honored that we're here at such an event that's the largest gathering of all the boards and committees. That's terrific. There's so much interest. Because what we really are hoping for is your comment and your participation tonight. This is part of the overall water quality and wastewater planning effort, and what we're particularly focused on tonight is talking about the downtown area and the vision for that downtown area, and whether or not there are any changes or recommendations to some of the recommendations that came out previously, and we'll walk you through all of that information. I'm very fortunate tonight to be joined by Peg Barringer from Fine Point Associates. Peg is a partner with Fine Point Associates, and Peg and her team did one of the original studies here in Orleans about 5 or 6 years ago, did an analysis of the downtown, made some recommendations, and over the last month and a half, they have updated that. So that's part of what she'll be presenting. So our agenda for tonight is, again, I'll talk a little bit about the purpose of the workshop, give a little bit of the background, and then I'm going to turn it over to Peg, and she'll provide the update on the economic analysis she and her team have done. We'll review the recommendations that came from that study back in 2010. We'll go into your breakout groups. You're at them now, at the tables you're at, and we're going to walk through those recommendations to see whether or not you have suggestions for changes or modifications. We will document all of that, and then at the close of that discussion period, you have a facilitator at each one of your tables, and that facilitator will summarize what the discussion has been and essentially whether there's been agreement or not agreement on those questions. And then we'll do a quick wrap-up, and everybody will be on their way. So again, the purpose of tonight, as part of the overall evaluation of downtown, is really to look at the vision statements that were completed as part of the Orleans Comprehensive Plan and the Village Center vision statement. We'll review the recommendations that Fine Point previously put together in 2010, and then make any modifications or updates as you feel appropriate or would like to suggest. And then we, the team, will go back and use that information to put into the analysis of what the downtown could look like in terms of development and what that means in terms of wastewater management going forward. Just everyone is familiar with the downtown area, but you'll see that the distinction between the overall downtown area, which really goes from Brewster on the west to Eastham on the northeast, the 6A corridor going right through the heart of it, and then you'll see the village center. So those are the two areas we're talking specifically about tonight, and those are the two areas to which the vision statements apply. These are, you've done a tremendous amount of work in the last 10 years looking at various things and making real progress in the downtown area. You know, the 2006 comprehensive plan really talked about the overall character of the town, the things that were important to the town, the need to preserve certain things and protect natural resources while also really enhancing opportunities for the local citizens and enhancing opportunities for visitors to come and visit both the town and the village center. The village center analysis or plan really looked more closely at the town center and the opportunities it provided, both for the residents of Orleans, but also for tourists coming in. Looking at a market inventory, the nature of the businesses, what types of businesses were there, what might be missing, what might enhance the town center area. That was all wrapped up in the 2010 economic analysis that Fine Point completed. Following that, the Cape Cod Commission did a reset, or essentially an evaluation of the 6A corridor that runs through the entire downtown area. They actually confirmed as part of that analysis many of the things that Fine Point Associates came up with in their recommendations with regard to the nature of the businesses, the market mix, the economic trends, what would be valuable to enhance streetscape improvements, transportation and parking improvements. So those two evaluations were very similar in terms of the tone and the content that they contained, and therefore the recommendations are somewhat similar, and that's where we'll pick up tonight in looking at those recommendations. Other studies have been completed, again, to add into the information that's really available for you to make good decisions going forward. Other things that are relevant in the context of the work that we're doing, which is looking at the growth, if you will, downtown and what it means for wastewater planning. It's important to keep in mind the Board of Health regulations, the nutrient management regulations. And again, there are certain areas of town that are exempt from specific aspects of the nutrient management regulations. That does include some of the village area or the business area. But there are parts of that downtown area that it's directly relevant for, and so we'll be looking at that as we look at options for handling and reducing the nutrients coming from the downtown area. And another very important thing to keep in mind is, you know, looking at funding sources for how the town would actually implement some of the options for nutrient management. And one of the most important is the SRF, the State Revolving Loan Fund. And again, there is the opportunity for 0% funding if the town complies with certain actions, and that includes certain land use decisions that the town would make to control development or to have it be within how you want it to develop to be able to control the nitrogen loading that goes into the sensitive watersheds. All of this is feeding into the work we're doing. As most of you are aware, we are in the midst of doing a number of different things. We're working to develop and push to the next level the consensus plan that the town came up with just this past spring. So it is looking at both the traditional and non-traditional means to be able to reduce nitrogen in the sensitive watersheds. And as part of that, we're working to develop the concepts for the non-traditional technologies, the shellfish, the aquaculture, the PRBs, the permeable reactive barriers. And we're also looking very closely at the areas that have been proposed to be sewered. And tonight's focus, again, is on the downtown area, but we're also looking at Meeting House Pond. The input, as I said, from tonight is going to feed directly into the development of scenarios as to how much growth there might be in downtown and what that means for the generation of wastewater flows and what it means for loads. And that will feed to the engineering team, who will then look at the various options for wastewater collection and treatment. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Peg, and she's going to provide an update and a summary of the recent analysis that they completed. Here.
Well, good evening. First, let me say how nice it is to be back working in Orleans. I was here 10 years ago, 5 years ago. We did, as Betsy said, an economic analysis of the Village Center. And then following that, we worked with the planning board and the planning staff and citizens and the chamber to come up with a set of 24 recommendations. And it was great to kind of come back and start looking at things again and seeing how many positive things are going on and see how many of the recommendations have been implemented or underway. Notably the Orleans Community Partnership that's been developed and the Village Center Cultural District, and I know there's been a lot of great things going on. So it's really nice to be back. And just coincidentally, when I was preparing for this meeting, I was looking back to some of our records and the work that we had done 5 years ago. And we had had a number of meetings, and then it culminated in a major presentation meeting like this one. And it was exactly 5 years ago to the day. So just kind of a funny coincidence. So happy anniversary. Here we are again. So I want to highlight for you some things that came out of the update of the economic analysis. What we did over the last couple of months is this is now an expanded study area. So last time we just looked at the Village Center, now we're looking at the Town Center. We inventoried the commercial property and the businesses. We analyzed the composition and trends. We interviewed about 32 businesses. We conducted a new market analysis with the year-round and the seasonal population. And then we analyzed some other pertinent conditions. So I want to go over the highlights with you tonight. So that primer that you had in your packet, you could follow along with me. What I've proposed to do is kind of refer you to some of those tables in there. And to make it easier for you, I've put on the screen the page that we're on. So we're going to start looking at page 5. And there's 3 parts to this. And I know I saw on the agenda how much time I was allotted for this, but I want to say right now, don't worry, I'm not going to take all that time. We want to steal some time from that to have more time for discussion for you. So we're going to move it in that direction. So this is part of the real estate conditions and business conditions. This is where we started. And there's 1.1 million square feet of commercial space in the town center. And just to put this in perspective, that's about 1.4 times the amount of space in the Cape Cod Mall. 353 commercial units, most of which are pretty small. The median size is 1,500 square feet, and the vacancy rate is 4%. So just to kind of put that in perspective as well, the national retail vacancy rate is around, I think the national rate is probably around 13%. Greater Boston is at 6%, and the Central Business District of downtown Boston is at 4%. So that's your comparable when it comes to vacancy rate. And you can look at the town center as having 3 commercial nodes. So we've got this central node, the Village Center, which is the compact and walkable node, a lot of your small specialty shops. And then there's 2 outer nodes, which are anchored by shopping centers and grocery stores. And they're a little bit more, they're bigger footprints, more regional tenants, and more auto-oriented. We're moving on to page 6. There's 320 businesses in the commercial district, in the town center. And as I said before, the spaces are pretty small, and so are the businesses pretty small. The median size is around 1,500 square feet. You'll see on that page, though, I did also highlight some of the larger businesses. So in addition to the smaller ones, you've got Shaw's and Stop and Shop and Snow's and TJ Maxx, so a few larger, more regional serving tenants. And the 3 top ones, eating and drinking, probably no surprise. Miscellaneous retail, which includes gifts and galleries and used goods. And by the way, I just want you to know, these are not my categories. We're using a codification system that's used all over the United States, the North American Industrial Classification System. So I did not call these businesses miscellaneous. That's what they call them, miscellaneous. Because in Orleans, they're really not miscellaneous. There's a whole lot of what you have here, right? So this is where all the art galleries fall. This is where the gift shops fall on miscellaneous retail. And then professional, scientific, and technology is your other 3rd major category. And then if you look on page 7, It shows the establishments by type and square footage, just to give you an idea of the concentration and the mix. And again, to put this in perspective, you can compare it to something maybe you're familiar with, like Mashpee Commons. So if you have Mashpee Commons in your head, the town center is 3.4 times that. So you have over 3 times the amount of businesses. There's 110 businesses in Mashpee Common. There's 320 here. There's over 3 times the amount of commercial space here. If we just look at the Village Center alone, it's almost twice. It's 1.7 times what's in Mashpee Commons. So sometimes it's just helpful to have a comparative. There's a couple of categories on that list, if you look at that table, that maybe are not immediately apparent. And one of them is that miscellaneous retail one. So just to give you an idea, what is involved in that miscellaneous retail? 14 art galleries, 11 used goods stores, 8 gift stores, an office supply store, and a florist. So that's where that is. And then the other one, professional, scientific, and technology, that's not immediately apparent. 16 law offices, 4 accounting firms, and 10 architecture, engineering, design. So that's what makes up that category. And then on the right side of that page, there's a listing of where your real concentrations are, your business clusters, so related businesses that really have some opportunity for crossover patronage. Since we had the pleasure of working here 10 years ago, it was great to be able to have the data to now look back and see what's changed. And so we could look at the Village Center and see what's new. And one of the things that was interesting was that about a quarter of the businesses are new since 2010. There was also a number of businesses that had changed location, but there was at least a quarter of the businesses, 46 businesses, that were new. And about 5% per year, that was just on average over the last 5 years, about 5% of the commercial space is turned over each year. The vacancy rate is up a little. 2010, we had 16 vacancies on the first floor, and now, as of our inventory from November, there's a few more than that. There's 19 vacancies. As far as the mix goes, it's remained pretty much the same. The biggest changes has been in a few retail categories. One of them is there's a couple more sporting goods stores, which is really good news because we had talked about before that you have a cluster of sporting goods and recreation, so you're building out that cluster. And then there's 5 additional used goods stores, bringing the total to 10 in the Village Center, which is kind of an unusual thing. But then I thought, I looked at that a little closer, and thrift stores are kind of an interesting thing. Thrift stores tend to do really well in seasonal places where there's seasonal homes. And the other thing is, if you take a look at some of the thrift stores, they're not your grandmother's thrift store. So Wicked Thrift, which is kind of new on Main Street, that's a very nicely curated store, well merchandised, and seems very popular, and it's doing really well on the Cape. They have 2 other locations. So it's sort of just an interesting trend. It was one of the big ones that stuck out. We did interviews with about 32 businesses, and most of them appeared to be stable or growing. Only 7% said sales were down in the last 5 years. The other interesting thing was it seems like the shoulder season might be growing. We had a full 20% of the surveys, the interviews rather, that we did, they said that they were getting more traffic in the off-season. And I think we only had one person that say the reverse, that they were getting less in the off-season. Several people spoke about retirement or advanced age and not really sure how long their business was going to be in operation. So we might be expecting some more turnover in the next few years. 40% of them thought that there was a sufficient market to expand. But we did hear people say that space issues, personal capacity, or their age were inhibiting factors to that, but they thought the market was there. And then we did look at several restaurants. So we interviewed several restaurants, and about half of the food businesses that we talked to said that they were interested in expanding, but they were citing wastewater issues and permitting issues as inhibiting factors. And I just want to make a clarification. In the bottom right-hand corner of that page, you see the kind of businesses that we interviewed. And I realized I used kind of a confusing category. The very first one there that says limited service, it should really say limited service restaurants. So those were restaurants. So if you want to make that little note. And then a couple down, it says full service restaurants. So we interviewed limited service restaurants and full-service restaurants. The second part that I wanted to talk to you about is the market analysis. And we looked at the year-round and the seasonal market. And we're on page 13 and 14. And when we worked together 5 years ago, we identified the trade areas. We talked to businesses, we talked to people, we talked it over the planning department. We had a lot of discussions. We looked at the customer patterns, we looked at circulation patterns, and we determined that the primary trade area is Eastham, Orleans, and part of Brewster, and that the secondary trade area goes out to Provincetown and picks up the rest of Brewster, Harwich, and Chatham. So that's the trade areas that we looked at. And the market segments, we looked at the year-round residents that live here all the time permanently, and then we looked at the seasonal residents. So we looked at seasonal home users, and the other two categories of seasonal market segment are motel visitors and day trippers. We don't have good secondary data on either one of those two. So we focused our analysis on seasonal home users. It's the biggest part of that market, and we didn't have good data on the other two. So just a little bit about this year-round and then seasonal market. For our year-round market, in that primary trade area, there's over 14,000 households. And in the secondary trade area, 46,000 households. The population is particularly well educated. Median household income is below the state, but per capita income is a little bit above. And there's a great deal of diversity in income. They're a little bit older, so the average population, more than 1/3 are over 65. Small households, less than 1 in 5 have children. The population is not growing. So we've seen a decline since 2000, clearly, and in what's expected to happen in the next few years, in the primary trade area, a small decline, in the secondary trade area, a very small increase. So I just have to say, it's not expected to grow. The number of households in the secondary trade area is expected to expand a little bit, just because, and you might think, well, if the population is not growing, how are we getting more households? Well, we're getting more households because household size is going down and down. So we might expect to see a little bit more households, but with the population not expanding very much. For the seasonal market, in both Trade Area 1 and Trade Area 2, about half the homes are seasonal. A quarter of them are rented at least part of the year, and 3/4 are used only by their owners and their guests. So, and the other trend is there's a growing number of seasonal homeowners that have home offices. And what's happening is it's allowing them to telecommute and lengthen their stay and lengthen their weekends. And the trend seems to be people are coming for, Thursday, staying till Monday, and they're coming in the off-season as well. And that's the trend. That came out of trends that were done by research that was done by the Donahue Institute. And that tends to coincide with what the businesses said, where they were seeing a little bit more traffic in the off-season. The homes are used most frequently in the summer. Revelation, I know. They're also used by more people. And so the usage patterns are on that page. So in the bottom right on that page, you'll see by month, how people use their homes, how many times each month, and how many people. So obviously there's a lot more people in July, maybe there's 4 or 5 in the house, and in January, and they use their house for 20 days, and then come January, maybe there's 2 people in the house and they use their house for 2 days. So when we looked at that, one of the things that we could look at is, well, there's 7,000 seasonal homes in the Trade Area 1 and 24,000 in Trade Area 2. Given those usage patterns, we averaged out the population across the year, and that would be equivalent to another 8,500 people that were living here year-round in Trade Area 1, and another 30,000 people in Trade Area 2, if we spread it out over the average. Your population is obviously very uneven when you get people to come and go, but that's what it looks like when it spreads out. The other thing to kind of keep in mind about this seasonal market is that study that was done by the Donahue Institute. There was one done in 2008, a survey of seasonal homeowners. And for the Lower Cape and for this area, almost 25% of those people said they were expecting to convert to year-round residents in the next 15 years. So that's out, we don't know exactly how many, but 25% between 2008 and 2023. So that's another trend I just want to make you aware of. In the next few pages of this study, there's a lot of information about the market segments and expenditures. So given the characteristics of the people that live here year-round, the income, how many kids they have, how many people in the household, and the characteristics of the seasonal market, we could begin to try to project what people spend. So we could project what people spend on various retail categories and restaurant categories, and then we could compare it with the sales of the businesses that are here. And we are essentially comparing supply and demand. So the first piece is the year-round residents. So if we just look at the year-round market, you can see, take a look at page 22. Let me get you on that page. So on page 22, the top graph. There's only leakage in two categories, in general merchandise and clothing and accessories from the year-round resident population. And general merchandise are things like department stores like Macy's and warehouse clubs like BJ's and Costco. So you're always going to have leakage probably in those areas. We don't have the footprints for those kind of stores. People are going to go outside the trade area for that. The other one there was leakage in was clothing and accessories. And again, you're not going to expect that everybody is going to buy their clothing locally. People are going to go outside the trade area to buy some of their clothing. And the other thing that's really unique and wonderful about Orleans is that you have so many art galleries. And I wanted to mention that because I think that the leakage in this particular category might be overestimated. And the reason is your art galleries sell a lot of jewelry and clothing. And so what happens is the sales numbers end up under art galleries, which end up under miscellaneous retail, but the expenditure numbers I'm looking at are under jewelry and clothing. And so the amount of leakage that's going out of here, I think, is overestimated because of that. Now, when we look at the seasonal and the year-round population, in trade area 1 and 2, now we've combined seasonal with year-round, there's still leakage in general merchandise and in clothing and accessories, and it's underestimated for the same reasons we talked about. And then in trade area 2, there's some modest leakage in other categories. Electronics, appliances, health and personal care, and sporting goods. And it's a modest amount of leakage. The thing I also want to make note of is you'll notice that in the food service categories, there's no leakage. That category, the demand in this analysis is underestimated. And the reason for that is we're not counting day trippers and motel visitors. We don't have a good way of knowing how much they're spending. So they're the large, they have a very large impact on this category of eating and drinking establishments. So the fact that on this analysis it doesn't show there's a leakage, there could very well be a leakage because we're not accounting for those expenditures. But one thing that I think comes out really clearly from looking at this market analysis is how dependent the businesses that are here now are on the seasonal market. So the importance of support and the importance of the seasonal market in supporting the current level of retail and restaurants, if you take a look at the far left column, so these are your existing retail and restaurants, and in the right side, this is the maximum amount that could be supported if we were only capturing the year-round residents. So it's less than 2/3, it's around 60%. And we could only support 60% of the businesses here if everybody here did all of their shopping here. That's not very likely. But if everybody here did all their shopping and all their dining here, you could support about 2/3, less than 2/3 of the businesses that are here now. And when we look at restaurants, without the seasonal support, there'd be less than half the restaurants here. And in trade area 1, the immediate trade area, it would be more like 1/3. There'd be less than 1/3 of the restaurants here. And I thought it might be useful to look at just Orleans by itself, not the whole trade area, but just Orleans. And so when we look at Orleans, we're only looking at Orleans businesses comparing to Orleans population, year-round population. So in this case, the existing retail and restaurants, are on the left, and the Orleans residents could support about 1/3. About 1/3 of the businesses that are in Orleans with just the year-round population. And same thing goes, only if you do all of your spending here. And, it's a very unique population here because not only do you have fluctuations in the summertime, but it appears that you have fluctuations in the wintertime as well with a lot of snowbirds and people leaving the season. So you're never going to have all of your year-round population doing all of your expenditures here because they're not even here all of the time. And without the seasonal market, there'd be less than half the restaurants. So that kind of gives you an idea of the importance of the seasonal market. Then we looked at another category, and these were just other pertinent conditions that we thought might be helpful to you as you think about this town planning and moving forward with the wastewater issues. So, and we're on page 25, if you're following along. So the first thing, these are just the demographics for Orleans alone, the town of Orleans. There's 5,666 residents, and the characteristics are fairly similar to the rest of the Trade Area 1. They're well-educated, household income below Massachusetts, per capita income above Massachusetts, and a great deal of diversity in the income. So when we looked at income, one of the things we look at is average income compared to median household income. So here, the average household income is $87,000, and the median household income is $64,000. That spread is very, very significant. And what that means is you've got people at both ends of the spectrum, and a lot in between. So very diverse income. And so, 16% of your households are below $25,000, and another 23% are between $25,000 and $50,000. And then you have households on the other end of the stream, very, very high income households that are pulling the average up. So there's a great deal of income diversity. Small households, even smaller than the rest of the trade area. It's fallen to less than 2 average size. And even smaller percentage of households with children, less than 13%, sorry about that. Older, more than 40% are over 65, and the population in Orleans does not appear to be growing. Same thing, we're expecting a small decline over the next 5 years if existing conditions continue. Some of the age trends, it just was interesting to note that Orleans seems to be leaking young workers. Ever since 2000, we're seeing a big decline. So between about 34% of people between 25 and 45 have declined by 34% since 2000. And at the same time, their senior population has increased by 8%. And there was a study done pretty recently by the Dukakis Institute it's part of Northeastern. And they asked people why they were leaving the Cape, especially young people, why they were leaving the Cape, and lack of jobs, lack of higher education options, social options, and wages to afford the housing were what came up at the top. And then, this is not in your primer, but I wanted to include this because someone was kind enough to send it to me, and it's hot off the presses. Scorecard, Orleans Community Indicators, that was done by John Fallender and George Meservey. And I thought these couple of statistics were really important for you to have in your mind tonight, that Orleans has lower than average unemployment, and it does have more jobs than workers, but the average wages are lower. So there's a 5% unemployment rate here compared to 8% in Barnstable, but the average wage per job is $37,000 compared to $41,000. So I thought those, so I borrowed these. I hope that was okay. These are your statistics, but I borrowed them. And then a little bit about housing. So the housing supply, and we're on page 26 and 27 here. Not a lot of variety in the housing market. 80% are single family compared to about 52% statewide. 77% owners, 23% rental units, and that's compared to 38% in Massachusetts. And then one of the striking things is the very low vacancy rate among rental units. So among homeownership units, the vacancy rate here is average, but among rental units, it's 1.5%. And to give you a comparison, in a healthy market, you'd expect to find a natural vacancy of 7%. And so this is very low compared to what you'd expect in a healthy market. There's a very high median sales price, $510,000 for 2015 up to October. And you can see the graph on page 27. It shows you compared to the rest of the Cape. That's significantly higher than the rest of the Cape, about 56% higher. There might be some housing needs that possibly could be accommodated in the town center. And so that's why we wanted to bring this up as you're thinking about the town center and the village center. Given your population is 40% over 65, the household size has fallen below 2, it seems like there might be a demand for maintenance-free smaller units, especially close to services. So where the maintenance would be handled communally, like in condos or townhomes, so some people are, mowing the lawn and taking care of a major part of the maintenance. And also, this market segment often likes to be close to services, likes to be walkable, as they kind of think about driving less. The other housing need that there might be there is entry-level or workforce housing. The housing cost burden in Orleans is pretty high. The median income household could not afford the medium-priced home in Orleans or rent. And so more than half the people with a mortgage pay more than 30% of their income, and more than 60% of the renters pay more than 30% of their income. So, the thing about workforce housing is when a community has entry-level housing for rent or to buy for new families, then it tends to ensure a stable workforce for year-round businesses. And when you don't have that housing, then year-round businesses tend to not be attracted to the community and not want to stay. And the final thing I want to talk about under trends on the updated economic analysis is this continuing expansion of cultural activities and facilities. And I know there's been a lot of strides in this area, and the Orleans Community Partnership has had a lot of initiatives to promote arts and culture and community. I know I was all over your website and seeing that the Unified Cultural Calendar and the Firehouse Community Center and a lot of increase in events and cultural activities, and of course establishing the Orleans Cultural Village, the Orleans Village Center Cultural District, which is intended to lead to sort of more businesses and more visitors and more jobs and more cultural facilities. So that's been a big change and a big factor to think about, that's continuing to expand. So we want to take a pause at this point and see if there's any questions or comments about anything that Betsy had to say or anything that we had to say about the economic analysis. So we're going to just take a few minutes for questions or comments before we move on. Yes?
I noticed in the leaflets there was no comment concerning internet shop.
These sales are sales in bricks and mortar. So when I didn't look at this, that's a whole nother category, is online sales. So the sales, the expenditures were expenditures that we would expect to be done in bricks and mortar. So clearly that's that's an influence, but these are the projections for what would be done in bricks and mortar. Yes.
On page 8, you note that a portion of the commercial units have changed over in the last 5 years. How does that compare to other units? It seems awfully high.
You read my mind, because I was looking all over to get a statistic somewhere, and I could not find any comparable to what would be like a normal turnover rate, or a turnover rate where you would expect. So I just can't tell you. I don't know if that's high. 5% a year doesn't sound so much to me. Somehow, 46 new businesses in the last 5 years sounds like a lot. So I don't have something to compare it to. So anybody in the real estate field here that can give us any enlightenment on that? So you do see a lot of turnover in commercial districts, and you don't seem to have any problem filling the space again. The spaces are filling right back up again, and they're filling right back up again with similar businesses. But we do see a lot of changing, the 46 are operating under new names and new management. I think in some cases they might have bought the previous business to some degree, but they did change the name. There's 46 with new names. Yeah.
I worked with one of the large mall developers, and they had a conscious strategy of encouraging the businesses to
keep it fresh.
eliminate, yes, that was a big piece of it.
Well, that's a really nice positive spin on this then. I like that. That's great. So we have a lot of fresh new businesses and new faces. And I do think that happens. I think that happens in commercial districts, even that aren't in seasonal locations, but probably even more so here. But that's interesting. That makes sense. Yes?
Yeah, I had a question about something you said you said that might be a need for small housing units, and that is with the present population. But I'm also thinking, I guess more as a comment, that we're losing young people and professionals on the Cape. So to draw those people in, we would need more housing units that are not necessarily
Small.
known at this point, but no, they might be.
Oh, okay.
Starter units. But I'm thinking that need may be greater than we're thinking from the statistics.
Oh, I think
In other words, if we had more housing units,
they would
we
come.
might be able to, yeah, exactly.
I think that you have practically no vacancy rate in rental units. So anybody that might be attracted to come here for a job, or they wanted to come live here and they wanted to rent first and then buy, there's pretty much nothing available. So, that's often the pipeline, is someone comes and rents first and then moves into buying a house. Or if you're a young person, especially if you live in Massachusetts, you rent for a while before you buy. And so the fact that you have a smaller number of rental units is also, confines that pipeline a little bit. Yes?
Yes, I think you said that one of your statistics was 40% of the businesses thought that they might expand.
40%, let me clarify and then I'll go on with your question. 40% thought that there was enough market for them to expand.
Okay, I know that some portion of that is the restaurants, but how does that map to your leakage data? Where is the spending going to come from to fill the expansion?
Well, I wanted to get 2 data points. So one data point, the leakage does not show a whole lot of leakage, but the businesses are on the ground and they felt that there was an expenditure. So those are 2 different data points. They could be optimistic and we might not be capturing, the leakage is not exactly right. We've underestimated the expenditures. But I think that a lot of it, a high percentage of it, were food businesses. So a high percentage of the restaurants were saying that they were the ones that wanted to expand. And I think that probably maps, because of the fact that we didn't include day trippers and motel visitors in the leakage analysis, that maps that they felt that there was more. And they've actually, several of the restaurants have tried to expand. They've tried to add seats or they've tried to add outdoor dining. So then you can say they're really serious about expanding, because sometimes when I ask businesses, everybody's thinking, sometimes everybody's thinking about expanding, but are they really going to expand to sort of another level? But the ones that said that they've tried, then I would say I would really, understand they're trying to expand.
So you're talking about the restaurants. How many? There were like 40 of those, 39, 40 restaurants, whatever it was?
We only interviewed a sampling. We only interviewed around 32 businesses altogether. So this is just a sampling.
Okay, I'm still trying to get an idea where the other, next to restaurants.
Where the other retailers?
Thoughts on expansion could be in what areas?
They were just, they were expressing that they felt that there was a need to grow, that their sales were growing. So I think that they were thinking that their sales were growing, and so that they could grow in capacity. And I think when they think expansion, some were thinking physical expansion, some were thinking capacity, meaning more sales staff and open, additional hours. And that was just their opinion. So they were not necessarily, saying, I looked at this market analysis, but they were saying, that's our opinion from our on-the-ground level. We think the market is to expand. Yes?
When you discussed seasonal home residents, you did take into account weekly renters. But prior, and I'm looking at page 14, trade area delineation. When you shot it up on the screen, you did not have weekly homeowner or weekly home renters as one of the categories. Did that get absorbed in hotel motel stay?
Nope, that's in seasonal homes. That we added seasonal homes regardless of the population that owned the seasonal homes and the population that was renting the seasonal homes.
So you took it more as an occupancy?
Yes. So everybody that was in a seasonal home, we could get a number for. We couldn't get a number for the people that were day tripping. And we couldn't get a number for the motel visitors. But we could get from the usage patterns, we could get that from the seasonal homes. So a quarter of them rented, but we could get a number for how many people and how many days they were rented, and so how the house was used. So that was included in those expenditures.
So you have a confidence in the occupancy level?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's where that 8,500 number came from. So that there's only, that there's 7,000 seasonal homes, that equals out to be 8,500 additional year-round residents, as if there were that many here. So that's significant. It doubles your population in the trade area if you think about those visitors. Yes?
Of the restaurants that you spoke to, how many were seasonal and how many are year-round? Because I'm, as a restaurateur in town, I'm curious who wants to expand and how they're justifying that in the wintertime. So,
most of the businesses we talk to are at least open in November, because that's when we did the interviews. So it's kind of hard for us to tell sometimes with the restaurants who's seasonal and what do you call seasonal? When do they close and how short their season is? But it can tell you that we did the interviews in November, so most of them were open at that time.
Well, I think that would be an important metric to your survey because the population, you estimated 8,000 based upon your numbers and everything like that. Come back in January and show me 8,000 people in town. I think you'd be surprised.
Right. It's not 8,000 now. It's it's twice that many in the summer, right? And so because it's so uneven. Yeah. So that's a good point.
I would be happy as one of the larger restaurants in town to sit down with you and talk about real numbers.
Okay.
And we could help you out with that.
Great. Wonderful. Any other? Yes.
Lots of young workers. Do you have any idea how many of these young workers are moving from the Cape entirely versus out of Orleans?
Off the top of my head, I don't. But I bet if I dug deeper into that survey that was done by the Dukakis Center, they might have asked that question so we could find that out.
No, because obviously it's much cheaper to live in other towns around the Cape than it is in Orleans for young workers.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you say off the Cape?
Yes.
The majority are going off Cape. I do remember that from that. The majority is going off Cape.
Can I ask another question?
Sure.
Lack of higher education options, does that mean we don't have enough universities on the Cape? What does that mean?
I think that what that means is that people would stick around if they thought they would, begin. A lot of people are beginning their career, but also working towards another degree or another career option. So they like a place where they can go to work and they can also take some classes. And so it's those kind of options that aren't here that, make people say, because a lot of times people are, a lot of our young people, right, and if you have kids, they're not all getting their dream job, shall we say, out of college, and how they look at a job is, okay, they're not taking their dream job, but while they take their not dream job, they're working towards something better. So they like to be near where there's educational opportunities. I think we have 1 minute to wind anything up, or is there one last question?
Yeah, could you put together that 8,500, could you break that at some point by month? Because what does that translate to in terms of July or August?
Take a look at the chart. Let's look at the chart here.
Is it multiplication of the chart?
Let me just find. Is it 18? It's 18. Thank you so much. This gives you a pretty good idea. There's a figure 15 at the bottom of page 18 that gives you an idea of the number of days per month the homes are in use and the people that are in the home. So as you can see, it ramps way up in July and August and comes way down in January. But that, it gives you an idea that it looks like there still are people here coming in January, but just not very many days during that month. And there's not very many people with them. Then in July and August, it goes way up in people, and it also goes up in number of days there are people occupying the house. And so, to your question earlier, that would mean renters and owners. So it would capture both of those.
But I'm not trying to figure out what that multiplies to. Would that be like 20,000 people in July and August, or if it's 8,500 year-round extra?
So let's see. If there is, it looks like the average number of days for in use in August is somewhere around 25. So that'd be 25 days of the month they're using their home on average. And then go down to the bottom one and look at August. And it looks like the average is there's 4.5 people in that home for an average of 20 days. So if you added those together, that's the average usage pattern, right? And then we would have to multiply that times the 7,000 seasonal homes in the trade area. And that would give you the population that would be in this area during August. And a little math class for bonus. So we're going to move on to the next section here. And we want to kind of look back to 2010. We came up with some recommendations as we worked together in a group, exactly 5 years ago, and came up with some recommendations. And you have a handout in your packet. So it's a two-sided handout. And we're not going to go through all of these, and you're probably saying, thank God right now. We're not going to go through all those, but I wanted you to have them as a reference. That's really what we came up with, and there was 24 recommendations and a whole lot of action steps. But I thought what would be more useful as we start thinking about digging into the town center planning exercise and reviewing some of these recommendations, especially the recommendations that have to do with growth and wastewater planning, I thought it would be more helpful to really look at what was the sort of underlying thinking and principles that we were considering when we came up with those recommendations. So, you know, what we were really looking at is what makes a successful downtown or a village center, you know, and I think the first thing is identity and promotion. So unifying elements so that the district stands out. Good-looking gateways, you know, making a good impression. People know when they've arrived. Promotional efforts, so everybody knows what's in the downtown and what the businesses are offering. Wayfinding signages, so you can find, you know, the stores, you can find the facilities, you can find the parking. Aesthetic appeal, so good-looking, attractive, you know, it has to be attractive to customers. It has to be appealing storefronts and signage, especially blade signs are really effective in pedestrian areas. There has to be critical mass and a clustering of compatible uses. So there has to be enough there for someone to want to go someplace. And so we have to think about, you know, clustering like businesses together. Clustering businesses that are that depend on walk-in trade, that are open similar hours, and where you don't have a lot of dead spaces, where people that are going to be closed on Saturday mixed in with everybody that's open on Saturday. And there has to be a concentration of retail and restaurants to really serve as a destination or a magnet. So there was some research done by this company called Brooks International as to what makes a destination. So they looked at all these different destinations and downtowns and whatnot, and they came up with this 10 plus 10 plus 10 rule. That you have to have, in 3 blocks, 10 destination restaurants, retail, 10 eating and drinking places, and 10 places open after 6 o'clock, preferably including entertainment. And that's what you need to make a destination. So I think, you know, that's part of this idea of a critical mass and clustering, that there's enough stuff in one place that people would want to go. The right mix of offerings, so a variety and quality of goods and services that match the market that we're trying to attract and includes arts and culture. Ambiance, customer comfort, and social gathering spaces. So number 1 through 4 attracts customers to your downtown, and number 5 makes them stay. Right? So in retail and restaurants, this kind of stuff, we want to attract more customers, but we want to extend their stay. And so they have to be comfortable here. It has to be a good place to walk around. There has to be places to sit and people watch. There has to be social gathering places. You know, the trend in retailing is to go to lifestyle centers, right? Nobody is building conventional shopping centers anymore. Everybody is building lifestyle centers. More entertainment, a lot more open space, a lot of places to sit around. They look like downtowns, but they're by one developer. And people want to be seen and they want to see. Like that's what the trend is. So people want to, you know, a lot of interaction between the street and what's going on inside the businesses. So a lot of transparency, being able to look inside, seeing the diners, seeing the shoppers, sidewalk dining, being able to see and be out there. It's making people want to be part of the scene. You know, and I think that, you know, one thing that we want to take away is we shouldn't think about your town center or your downtown as a shopping place. You should think about it like a social place. That's where downtowns and village centers are going to exceed, because it's a social place. Because, and you nailed it on the head, right? People are going to shop online. They can do a lot of things online. When they come downtown, they're looking for an experience, and they're looking for a social interaction. And restrooms, public restrooms. Being able to easily find a public restroom makes a big difference with people staying more than 2 hours in your commercial area. Residents living in and near downtown, so there's more customers for the businesses, and it adds a lot of vitality, right? 24-hour presence, a lot more people, and you know, people want to go where people already are. So if there's people already there, it'll attract other people. anchor tenants, magnet uses, and attractions. And you'll see this in one of the recommendations that we had last time, is coming up with some possible anchor or magnet attractions, destinations that will bring people in, and bring people in from outside the community. Good businesses, good customer service, and this whole experiential piece, right? So because of this, because people can get almost everything online, and we're moving to like same-day delivery, right? They can order food, take out food over the phone. You know, we can get all what we need, but if we're coming to a downtown, we're looking for an experience. So that means a clerk that doesn't just have a transaction with you, they tell you about the item, they tell you how to service it, they, you know, have a lot more to offer. You don't just come down to town to look around, but there's tastings, there's demonstration, there's meet the author, meet the artist. You know, there's specials that change on the menu daily. So that's what downtowns have to be about. Ongoing events and cultural activities. So this not only attracts people, and it makes them more aware of what's available in their downtown or your village center, but it also creates a relationship with the residents and the downtown. You know, this is where we go to get our entertainment. This is where we go to get the stuff. And then finally, pedestrian, bike, and car friendly. So no matter how you're arriving into the commercial district, it's easy for you to get there, good sidewalks, lots of connections between the businesses, and we talked a lot about that in the recommendations last time, so that you can park easy, you can park once, and then you can walk everywhere, because you are so, the paths are so attractive and so easily findable that you want to go from store to store on foot. So these were the items that really are behind those 24 recommendations that you have from last time we were together in 2010. And what we want to do is we've taken some of those recommendations and we want to have a discussion. And we want to turn the larger part of our presentation tonight over to people that really matter, you all, right, because you're part of the community members, to have a discussion on some of the recommendations from last time, a couple of recommendations that are kind of in light of new economic data, and also review the vision statements from the previous planning activities. So, do you want me to set this up, or would you like to set this up?
No, I think you did a very good job. Each of you, I hope, has a packet, because you'll need to be reviewing the question. Peg is going to monitor the time, because in the remaining time, they'll allow like 20 minutes at the end to have a report back. So from now until about 10 after 8, you are to discuss each one of the questions as a whole in your table, come up with a decision as to whether you strongly agree, moderately agree, whether you agree or don't agree, with a specific recommendation or statement. And that will give us an idea as to whether or not you are thinking in the same line as you were 5 years ago with some of the recommendations you made, or whether you want to make some suggestions as to how to modify it, whether to strengthen or change what that specific issue is. So again, Peg will monitor the time so you can all move together through the sequencing of the question. You all finish at the same time. But you'll have the discussions at your table. Each of the tables has call it a moderator, so if you guys want to raise your hands, they're the people that will take notes of all the wonderful things we're going to suggest, and will also tally the votes so that we can come up with sort of consensus among the tables at the end of the evening, and then we, the team, will use that information as we go forward looking at different scenarios for development. Okay?
So you should be pulling out a document from your packet that says Downtown Planning Workshop Breakout Discussion Guide. And your moderators are going to sort of lead a little bit of discussion on this first piece. There's two pieces here, the vision statement review and then a selection of strategies. And the vision statements are the second page of that packet. So that's the place where we should start, is look at these vision statements, see if there's any additions or qualifiers or modifications that you want to make to this statement, and work with the moderators to take notes.
Okay. And we basically have now, like 7 minutes per question.
Okay. All right, so Betsy is reminding me Betsy's reminding me that my job is the timekeeper. And so, discuss, and then I'm going to give you a little ding-a-ling when it's time to close your discussion and move on to the next one.
We're talking about the vision statement. We're going to start with the village statement, or vision statement of the village center. Statement A on the back. The first two questions you have to read, and then we'll start talking. So if you can read on page 2, statement A, and I'll give you 30 seconds, 45 seconds to read that.
Time for people to read, yeah, just reading statement A, the village center, just talking about the village center.
Is it missing anything?
So, are there any initial thoughts, comments in terms of? But in terms of what you would like to see of your village center,
It's getting at both. It's getting at removing modern communication aesthetic so that it's maintaining
On the wireless, do you feel that
so can we add something to sustainability?
first question.
What would you?
Do you have any recommendations?
You see that as a negative. I think there's a failure.
Action items.
So I'm giving you your 1-minute warning. And then just a little check. You're working on A and B? Or just A? Just A? Okay. So yeah, it's time to vote and wrap up this discussion in 1 minute.
Figuring out how we get this is a bigger part of the question. Like this is what we think we want make what we
So remember in school when they said pencils down? This is kind of like that, but it's just move to the next one. So move on.
We dropped the word marriage.
This one is a little bit different. Is there anything in here that you're saying, no, we don't want that? There's not a lot of different components in there, but generally we think that we do want all of those things. And you can just see out of whack.
How's everyone?
Exactly, mother apple pie.
And the word quality of life is right there. What is it?
So when I read that to be fishing and farmhouse. I mean, that's immediately what came to my mind. I don't know that that's what was meant, but that's maybe because it followed maritime heritage. I
So we're coming up on the 1 minute mark.
Your clock is wrong.
I think what was initially wrong is how many minutes we have for each one. Not unless we're going to be here till 8:30. I think there's 9.
Scientists working here in Maine, or whether
These are quite good. So this is basically
So you should be on the next question, at least on page 3, starting part 2. And these now are recommendations. So do a little discussion and then take a vote.
We're now talking about strategy. Strategy A is to encourage increased density in the village center. I'll let you read some of these.
I think this could
Maybe you're already there, or you're going there. Perhaps, I can bring up here, multi-level is one of the things that you were commenting on.
All right, so you should be getting down to the 1 minute mark. I'm overhearing some conversations as well, and I think sometimes it's hard to describe density, and people are saying, well, what does density mean? And I think that feel free to add those comments. And it might be that you want more density, but keep footprints small. If that's what you want, then that should be the comment, because you could have more stuff, but just keep the footprint small. More doesn't necessarily mean big footprints. So that's the kind of discussion that we're hoping that you provide, those kind of comments. I'm sorry.
Strongly agree.
Okay, now I'm going to give you a little different direction here. I'd like you to move on, but I'd like you to move on to C. We're going to skip B for right now. We'll come back to that if we have time. So page 4 on C.
Now we understand. That was crafty. Thus encouraging density. A movie theater or entertainment use for attractions such as the aquarium or museum. So, how do we feel about bringing something more that people are coming for this, and then they're staying and going to the other places I saw the cash down. Where
So we're getting close to the 1 minute mark. And also, I want to say about this one, if you have particular magnet uses that you would like to see explored, you could add those here in your comments.
Skeptical agreement. We'll put that
Okay, so we need you to move on to the next one. If you're not there yet, page 4D.
Strategy D is to attract more residents in and near the village center with the benefits of increasing markets for our businesses, green vitality, and more people on the street. The area is perceived as alive and more. I think I've already heard talking. Yes.
All right, so we can go on to the next question. Increased housing.
I'm Mike Tanaka. I work with the town consulting with the Econ program manager for the wastewater. And good job, by the way. I've been listening to the discussions there, and something's striking me that seems to me a key question. I don't want to interrupt their discussion with the time, but you presented in your presentation a lot of information regarding age and demographics, educational opportunities, incomes, seasonal populations, that housing, stuff like that, which sort of is a setting. And then you have the vision statements, which are somewhat separated from that. This is what we like to do. When people are making the comments, is how can we vote against this? This is all
right.
So you get these vision statements that generally everybody's agreeing with. The question,
you're at the 1 minute mark.
It seems to me the question is, given the vision statement is here and the town's here, what is the likelihood from the point of view of utility planning, wastewater planning, that we're going to get there? Is there the drivers to get to that location so that someone like a Ecom can then say, okay, that's going to convert to 200,000 gallons a day instead of 100? Or are we going to, because of these constraints and limitations and factors, are we going to get there halfway or all the way, or is it going to take 10 years or 20 years to get there? Linking the vision with the reality, where in the middle are we going to fall?
I think that one of the things is that we were thinking that we had to confirm the vision statement
yes,
first.
Yes, and I understand what you mean.
Because I think some of the things about density
yes.
and housing options.
Correct.
Exactly.
And that's what they're doing very well.
Yeah. Yeah, the connect. Okay. By the way, I love doing this. I feel like I'm calling bingo. So you should be on page 6 on, nope, wait a minute. Did I miss one? Okay, let's try this. What one should you be on? Page 5E? That sounds good to me. Feel free to move on. If you're quicker, sometimes no discussion is good discussion. Feel free to move on. And remember, we skipped one. So you could always go back. If you finish early, you could always go back to B, which we skipped.
And you have 10 minutes to finish all of your questions.
I think it's a wonderful
Wait till I just announce the 1 minute, and then I can have a little break. Okay, you're coming up on 1 minute, so you want to finish this one up? E should be finished up. You can take a vote.
I'm pretty low profile, but I just was curious to know. I noticed that maybe one. I didn't know if I was finished out. I didn't take it personally.
I'm going to make a note.
So it's Ben's finished.
Yeah, I'll just make a note of that. We missed it somehow. We tried to get everybody in, but it's financial. And that's, that would be the name that you want on all the records. Something was on the TV, things that we didn't know which one to put on. Okay, well, let's talk about that.
Okay, no problem. You did a great job.
Next time. Okay, thank you. All right, moving on. So everybody should be on at least F. And if you got done early, like Betsy's table, go to B. Go to B. Okay, this is your 1 minute mark before we finish this one up.
Finally, the town got smart and said, yeah, you can come.
Okay, this is the last one we're going to do, so move to the next one, and if you're all done, go back and look at that other one that was on B. But this is the last one we're going to do.
I want to read you what we said, so that you can report this out, make sure you right. All right. The vision statement for this, which is the village center, everybody agreed that we're starting with the statement.
It seems to me more of those are places with more of those.
So you're at the 1 minute mark. Make sure you've got your votes for this last one. Okay, so we're going to call time on this. So what we want to do is we want to have the moderator from each group report out. So take 30 seconds and organize your thoughts, because we're going to time you, and you only have 2 minutes each.
This is very stressful.
So you only have 2 minutes each, so make sure that your moderator has clearly understood your opinions and is able to present in 2 minutes.
On the vision statement, I heard primarily agreeing that
Steve, those 10 things you put up there, those are terrific. That's really the heart of what we're doing.
Yeah, I thought that would be the best way to remind people, right?
Distribute those maybe in a follow-up. That wasn't in our material.
No, it wasn't, because I just, yeah.
There was,
Yeah.
we made those are really good. And those were all kind of structural, financial kind of things that we can encourage. By the way, thank you again. I hope George can probably get some credit for what you said about the cultural system.
Oh, yes. Yes. No, I wanted to make sure that we recognize you because, yeah.
So I'll talk to you because I really love what you did as well. I think I sent you an email. I didn't as well. He's writing a book on this whole process.
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah, sure.
I did send it to you, I think. Maybe I didn't, but I will.
Okay, great, great. Okay. So, we want to report out. So let's Aaron. Not to put you on the spot, but please be on the spot. You're number one. Well, your table, yes.
Okay, so the report back from my table, first of all, they were great. Generally for the vote, just came for general consensus. So for the most part, across the board, there were no disagrees. It was largely agreed or strongly agreed, but just to take a little bit on the vision statements. The Village Center vision statement, strongly agreed with it, but it was definitely noted that you need to provide the required infrastructure to attain that vision. Without that in place, it is unattainable. So provide the wastewater infrastructure, the parking that's needed to support the additional people and businesses. Those are two key things. But the vision statement itself, very much agree with. And for the townwide, there was a suggestion of possibly moving a little bit more of the focus to the year-round population, the residents. There's first that destination attraction in the seasonal. There's definitely the seasonal population is very critical, as we heard today. But to maybe massage the statement a little bit to put the year-round population first. The other items, is there anything wastewater parking? Wastewater parking came up throughout several of the strategies and goals that they needed to attain.
45 seconds.
Oh, 45 seconds. Those are the main things that I needed to report back, unless I'm missing something. Entertainment, downtown draw, a movie theater comeback, something to get families, multiple interaction downtown to increase the vitality of the downtown center was also a good thing that the table wanted to see happen. That's all I have.
Wonderful, and right on time. Can we move to the table behind you? Could you stand up for us and use your outdoor voice?
So they generally agreed also with those sentiments that the year-round residents should come first. There was a lot of discussion actually about the vision statement being far too long and too all-encompassing, that if it's truly a vision statement, it needs to be more concise. And obviously, don't say anything that can't be promised, such as parking. That everyone did seem to agree that they want a lively, more densely populated area in the village. Not that maybe it's not really considered small town. Just phrasing maybe, not small town, not urban, but not, just different phrasing. They did all agree that they'd like to attract a younger workforce, but the how is the roadblock.
40 seconds.
And they also want a mixed use, not independent different zones, so that, residential and commercial would all be in the same area. And everyone did want a vibrant area. Increased housing options, but how? And the outdoor dining was a discussion in the fact that there are roadblocks to outdoor dining. And so if those don't limit the number of seats in restaurants or the way that food can be presented and be creative about how to we need to find ways to be creative in handling resources so that outdoor dining can become a reality.
Okay, thank you. Could we move to Betsy? Little redirect.
Sorry. Throw me off there. Okay, the vision statement for the village center. All agreed that they said a few things should be added, such as maintaining environmentally sensitive areas considered by the mentioned town code. We're concerned about the wastewater systems and need to provide more support to the businesses in downtown to make sure that they have survivability. Everybody totally agreed strongly on the vision statement for the town, very long and high. The question about use density, yes, all strongly agree. You get the parking in the first places. We need to remove the zoning constraints that make it uneconomical for developers to do this. And interested in increasing the density but keeping footprint small, similar to what is suggested. All agree that it would be beneficial to prioritize the first floor space for retail and restaurant uses. There was some question about the type of uses. Does that mean professional uses should not be located on the first floor? And if we're trying to get people in the downtown area, how does it work out for kind of putting into sync the hours for both the retail and the professional? I'll agree the movie theater back on the CBS one, which would be a great idea. We had a skeptic, positive skeptic in the group who just thinks, it's a great idea, but might not happen.
40 seconds.
And there was great support for amenities such as an academic or learning center to allow continued lifetime learning in the course of lifetime. All strongly agree more residents in the village center. Housing, for year-round housing, definitely geographic housing, so we can encourage younger families, multiple types of housing, and more rentals. Increase outdoor sidewalk dining, all strongly agree. Facilitate business development and expansion. All three strongly agree to more people to support the mix of businesses. More moderate price rental units would encourage online shopping. Look for businesses that support year-round activity and don't need any restaurants.
Okay, terrific. That's the way it's done. How about the back corner?
Okay. Strong agreement on statement A. I think one of the things that was discussed was basically that the traditional New England village is something that was kind of done piecemeal and over time. Orleans is looking at something that's probably going to happen more quickly, and maybe a little bit of concern on how we're going to do that quickly and do it kind of seamlessly. Statement B wasn't as quite as strongly agreed, but I think a strong agreement on it. We really want to make it a family destination with access to beaches, water resources. There was strong agreement that there needs to be good restaurants, and there was concern about people moving out of the area because of lack of housing and also affordable housing. Strong agreement to encourage increased density in the village center. That was an area where they think that there is probably a good bit of difference in opinion, but, you know, wanted people to be kind of open-minded as far as the development goes, and maybe kind of look at the end goal as far as what the development is, and kind of open-minded on how this takes place. Let's see. Attract more residents in and near the village center. We had a pretty good discussion about growth between village center and maybe some of the outlying areas. We talked about maybe a little bit between Shaw's in the village center and how those areas might be walkable areas that people could go from one location to another. Kind of the same with other areas about Midas and Tedeschi, and got a little bit maybe into the zoning and how that might be done. Moving on to the next one, increase housing options for year-round residents. Basically, the biggest comment there was we need a spectrum of housing. You know, not just all granite countertops, but housing that other people could afford, and not just maintenance-free places, or maybe they are maintenance-free places, but more affordable maintenance places. Increased outdoor sidewalks, and dining options. I think everybody was in agreement with that, although there were concerns over the limitations of the number of seating based on septic system loads. Let's see. On that note, everybody else ran over a little bit, so. One of the best things, you know, one of the things is just there needs to be a balance between both the town center and the village center, that not everybody looks at one and not the other, that they need to kind of grow hand in hand and work together with each other.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along.
You'll be last. As far as the state of the age goes, I think everyone was pretty much in agreement, but one of the things that came up, they didn't want to be like a Nantucket or a Chatham. They didn't want to have that, whatever. And they wanted to have more aesthetics, general looks overall, and have a theme behind that. Obviously, you make it more welcoming for people coming into the town. Density center, increasing the density, kind of split between agree and strongly agree, but one of the keys was no big box stores, no chain stores downtown, maybe two-story max on all the buildings, and there was some concerns about setbacks and relative to parking. All strongly agreed with prioritization of the first floor space. Magnet uses, obviously some of the same things that everyone else came up with, the movie theaters, small college campus. They also talk about poor weather locations, destinations, when it's poor weather, instead of going to beaches, to have places to be able to bring the kids, etc. One also came across strong in a couple of places was high-speed internet service, which goes with that whole college theme and education. Longer business hours during the summertime. D was attracting more residents to the village center. Comment came up about maybe one day or one night per week shutting down downtown. So it's more of a walkable area, so there's no cars, which we've seen in other communities and places. Year-round residents, condos, retail, more consistent. Obviously jobs is the one that you need to be able to support that. Dining options, was make sure there was water views with them. A couple of the others that came up was a bylaw to take a lot of the, reduce the parking requirements in order to take some of the existing parking, and Stop and Shop as an example was used. How they have a lot of parking that's really for the maximum use and it doesn't always get used and convert it back to green areas. And to have a consistent architectural fit into the community, so you don't have just a hodgepodge of type of buildings.
Terrific. Thank you. And certainly not least.
And I get to be on time, right? We actually have very strong agreement in both the vision statements and the strategies. With respect to the vision statement, one addition that was suggested was, for an aesthetic perspective, taking the utilities below ground and perhaps bringing in more modern telecommunications and wireless. There was an emphasis on bringing in businesses that pay more than minimum wage, recognizing that, you know, the restaurants, the retail may not be providing wages to support the relatively high or high cost of living. Residences, in the vision statement, there was a statement about they don't necessarily have to be on the second and third floor on top of commercial or professional, that we could have dedicated buildings, 1, 2, 3 stories that are solely residential. Certainly there was an emphasis in a lot of our discussion about bringing in younger people. There was a recognition that it is an aging population and there's a responsibility to provide services that support the aging community, but it may not be the vision that Orleans wants to be a senior living community. So let's bring in younger people, but the cost of living is a hindrance. With some thought to bringing in businesses that pay higher wages that might attract the younger people, the medical and educational areas were thought as being possible areas to target, but a recognition that Orleans may not be able to do that themselves, that perhaps regionally that's something, the work may not be located here in Orleans, but they may choose to live in Orleans if Orleans can provide something. Good time.
Great, thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you so much for doing that. I was going to just make one comment because it came up. 2 people asked me about it, and while we were working, and they were supposed to be working, and then it came up again, and this is the internet. And I just want to mention how that relates to the stores and the leakage and the things that we were talking about earlier. What we're seeing in a lot of downtowns that we work in is a trend towards multi-channel retailing. And what that means is that the bricks and mortar stores are also getting revenue from online sales, or they're getting revenue because they're acting as a wholesaler and they're using their store as a showroom. And it's how small businesses can be more successful even if they don't have the sales through the door to support themselves. And so I just wanted to mention that's certainly a trend we're seeing in other downtowns. It's particularly helpful in a seasonal community when your revenue drops off for several months of the year if you have multi-channel retailing. However, you also need high-speed internet for that. So I'll leave you at that, and I'm going to turn it over to Betsy.
Okay, we just have one closing slide to wrap it up, although I have to borrow this again. Okay, just ahead of myself for a minute. Anyway, I just want to echo Peg, tremendous input, participation, and I think enthusiasm. It's obvious everybody cares a great deal about what happens, and we appreciate the input. So in terms of next steps, the team that you see here and a few people you don't are going to look at the input, and our job is to sort of consolidate it and come up with some scenarios. We're going to look at what you expressed with regard to what you'd like to see in terms of additional development, density of development, type of development in the village center and in the town center. And we'll look at it in terms of what does that mean for number of units, how much wastewater would it generate, and we will prepare those 3 scenarios. Our job is to come back to the boards in the latter part of January, mid-January, latter part of January, and present those 3 scenarios for discussion and hopefully some consensus as to what should go forward into the recommendations for the update of the CWMP. So we'll turn those scenarios into flows and loads and what it means in terms of collection systems and treatment and what it means for capturing the rest of the reduction needed in the nutrient load to the sensitive water bodies, what that means for capturing it through other means, which might be some of the alternative non-traditional technologies. So again, you've been very helpful, really great to work with, and thank you, and have a wonderful rest of your night. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before you leave, we need to unwind this public meeting. So, Joy Cumming, could you please have your Architectural Review Committee adjourn, please? Just have a motion to adjourn. Good, thank you. Len, could you take care of the Water and Sewer Commissioners?
Move to adjourn.
Thank you. Steve, Planning Board?
Planning
Sanitary Board moves to adjourn.
Good. Jan, Board of Health?
We unanimously agree to adjourn.
Good. And the Water Quality Advisory Panel and the Board of Selectmen, a motion to adjourn, please. David, thank you. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all for joining us, and special thanks to Peg Barringer and Betsy and AECom. Thank you.